So I'll tell you about the growing role of patient organizations in taking part of all the value chain in research and development. And based on the example of the Association Française contre les Myopathies, which is the French Muscular Dystrophy Association, how the struggle of a patient group can translate into drugs currently in clinical development and hopefully soon made available to patients. First part of our talk, I'll tell you what Association Française contre les Myopathies is. Then I'll tell you about our R&D group, Genethon, 90% funded by Association Française des Myopathies, that is 90% funded by public generosity, and how this group is truly, you could compare it to a pharmaceutical research group funded by the French public. And then I'll give you, focusing more and more, I'll give you an example of one of our ongoing multi-center international trial with the example of a rare immune disorder, which is Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, because in contrast to what Hans just said, we're not focusing only on myopathies, but we are really, our focus is of general interest, rare diseases in general, knowing also that whatever we do for rare disease, whatever therapeutic innovation we develop for rare disease will be important and will benefit frequent disorders also. So let's start with Association Française contre les Myopathies. AFM was founded in 1958. You see here Madame de Quépert, who was the mother of 7 children, out of which 4 boys affected with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. She decided to create AFM to give voices to the parents and to the patients of this disease that was completely unknown, that was completely ignored both by the medical groups, by the physicians, by the state, and by the industry at a time, and which, you know, not that old, where if you had DMD, you would go to your physician and would tell you, well, you know, either we don't know what he has or whatever he has, just go, you know, it's nature, it's destiny, go back home and there's nothing we can do about it. In 1987, a cornerstone came into the history of AFM with the first French telethon. So AFM started the first French telethon in 1987. Inspired, taking example on the US telethon, but adapting it to the French situation. So it's a 30 hours yearly TV marathon. By the way, next French telethon will take place on next Saturday. So it's not only on TV, it's really a national event. 1/3 of all French cities have activities on the telethon day. Almost all schools in France participate to the telethon. All sports clubs participate to the French telethon. There's 53,000 associations which are not related to AFM who participate and help the telethon. There's more than 200,000 voluntary workers involved in the execution of the telethon. There's 5 million participants all over France, 1 million donors. We raised last year 90 million euros, which is approximately $120 million, which represents 3% of the global French public generosity. What's the governance here? So it's a board of directors at AFM, which is composed exclusively of patients and parents. It's a scientific council composed of 79 international members and 50,000 external experts. It's a financial board with 6 financial experts. The field of intervention are both research and development, innovation for genetics, for rare diseases, for biotherapies, but also a strong lobbying for social innovation and full citizenship for handicapped patients. Let's focus on research and development for a moment. In 2010, AFM dedicated 60 million euro to R&D on rare disease, which represents 70% of all funding of rare disease, including government funding, of course, in France on the same year. 50% of that funding, and this is really something specific to AFM, this is quite unique, 50% of that funding goes to R&D centers, which are either totally or in majority funded by AFM. And these are, let me see, this is the pointer here, yeah. These are either the Institut de Myologie with 270 scientists, which is a reference center for the development of biotherapies for muscular disease in Hôpital Pitié-Salpêtrière in Paris, 270 scientists. It's Genethon in Évry with 180 scientists, 90% funded by AFM. And the mission of Genethon is really developing gene therapy for rare diseases. It's iStem, which is the largest group on stem cells in France. 80 scientists, 50% funded by AFM, stem cells for rare diseases. So we're celebrating now the 25th telethon this week. What have been the achievements what have been the achievements to date? I'm not going to mention everything, but I want to mention a few of them. Genethon was funded in 1990. In 1992, the first maps of the human genome ever came out of Genethon. And when today historians come and write the history of the human genome deciphering, they come at many places, but including Genethon, where the first maps were produced. And somehow the publication by Jean Weissenbach with the genome mapping was for a long time the most cited publication in the literature. And this really gave rise to the possibility of identifying genes responsible for rare disorders. So not all of these genes were identified, of course, at Genethon, but really, I mean, the mapping of the human genome was an important step in allowing the identification of genes responsible for rare diseases. Then AFM has supported drug development in a large number of fields, leading to first human proof of concept trials, immune deficiencies. The baby bubbles trials first done in France were funded by AFM. Blood disorders, beta thalassemia, for instance. Exon skipping studies for Duchenne in many organizations were either totally or partially funded by AFM. Trials for retinal disorders, for CNS disorders, skin reconstitution, etc. So several human trials that were either partially or totally funded by AFM. Some of them led to approved treatments already, and some of these approved treatments are pointed out here on this slide. Now, ongoing, we have more than 300 R&D programs which are currently funded by AFM. An average of 400 publications in peer-reviewed journals per year. We have 55 proprietary patent families. And I will come back later on the issue of industrial property. We have what we call 20 strategic projects where AFM invests multi-million pluriannual budgets in order to move projects to the clinic. We have currently 35 active clinical trials in 30 different diseases, 50% of which are non-neuromuscular, to illustrate what I was telling earlier. Now, after having given this overall view on the activities of AFM, let me focus for a second on Genethon. So what is Genethon? So we were created in 1990. The mission is really developing drugs for rare disease and developing gene therapy drugs for rare disease. We started in 1990 with the participation, as I told you, to the deciphering of the human genome. We are today a fully integrated pharmaceutical organization going from upstream science to clinical development, including bioproduction, which you know is a critical element in the field of gene therapy. There are not that many experts out there, and I'll tell you a bit more about our capacity in terms of biomanufacturing for gene therapy. Our budget in 2010 was 26 million euro, out of which, as I told you, 90% were funded by AFM. 220 people, 180 scientists. We have a GMP production facility in place, and we're currently opening what will be the largest production plant for gene therapy products worldwide, which is called Genethon Bioprod. So we are overall looking at different disease areas. Neuromuscular disease, of course, this is I would say, at the heart of our concerns, but also disease of the immune system, blood, eye disease, and liver. The platforms we are using, we're talking about gene therapy, so the viruses you're using as vectors are important. We're using AAV and lentivirus. Overall, this is really one of the largest research centers worldwide dedicated to innovation for rare diseases, the discovery of innovative treatment for rare diseases. Why gene therapy? Let me tell you, why are we dedicating that amount of money, that resources to gene therapy? AFM has been supporting gene therapy in a very consistent manner at a time, at the end of the 90s and then at the beginning of the 2000s, at a time where many people said that it was a doomed field. AFM really believed that since 80% of these rare diseases are of genetic origin, gene therapy really represented one of the major hopes in the field. That it would take time, that it would take patience, but it did represent a major hope. And as of today, we have proof of concept. We're beginning to see proof of concept in different disorders, in immune deficiencies, in blood disorders, in CNS disorders, in retinal degeneration. And today, thanks to the work of many people around the world, and in part to the work that we've been doing, the technology has advanced up to a point where industrial manufacturing can start being considered, and the safety issues that were raised at the beginning of the gene therapy trials are now addressed. What we also believe is that not only gene therapy is of interest for rare disorders, but in many instances it could be applied to frequent disorders also. Still some challenges do remain, and we are addressing them. The complexity of the manufacturing, the design of the regulatory pathway. Here we're talking about a very specific regulatory pathway that we have somehow to invent and to draw with the regulatory authorities, and which we're doing. And also, translating a proof of concept in mice into a clinical trial in animal is already something different in the field of gene therapy than it is in the field of small molecules, and there are very few players out there that are able to bridge the gap. I will not go into the detail of the organization, just want you to know that we're covering the spectrum from therapeutic concept to clinical trial, including small, large animal testing, bioprocess development, GMP production, clinical trial. Our research really focuses both on therapeutic projects, but also on enabling technologies. We are in a field where we have to bring the technologies from the lab stage. Gene therapy technologies are really inherited from molecular biology laboratory, and if we want to make it an industrial, if we want to make it feasible from an industrial perspective, from a cost perspective, we really have to bring paradigm shifts in the way these vectors are made, and we dedicate 30% of more than 30% of our resources to development of enabling technologies. Then a third part of our activity is really dedicated to biomanufacturing. We're opening soon a new building, a new production facility, which is called Genethon Bioprod, which is going to be the largest facility worldwide for the production of gene therapy vectors. We've not been building it only on our own resources. We have had the strong help of the local governments and the French government, but we will be operating it only with the funds of the telethon. So it meets all the regulatory requirements to produce GMP batches for clinical trials, and also when the day comes for commercialization of the vectors. It's an L3 confinement, and it also meets the environmental regulations. It's a 5,000 square meter building, 4 production suites. It will allow us to produce 20 batches overall per year to support clinical trials, 10 batches of lentiviral-based vectors, 10 batches of AAV-based vectors. This will allow us to support our pipeline of projects, which is posted here. So we have, as I told you, projects in the field of muscle, immune diseases, eye disease, liver disease. We have an ongoing multicentric international trial on Wiskott-Aldrich trial. We will be starting another immune disease trial on chronic granulomatosis disease in 2012, which will also be international. We will be starting, hopefully, a Duchenne muscular dystrophy trial in 2013, and in 2013, a gene therapy trial for Leber optic neuropathy. We are in Ivry, but we strongly believe that we will not make it in isolation, will not make it on our own. So our objective is really to network and to interact with those leaders in the field with whom we can make it happen. We have clinical partners both in Europe and in the United States for the immune deficiency. We have clinical partners for neuromuscular disease, for retinal disorders, for the technological aspects. This gives you a view of our clinical and academic partners. We're also starting to have some industrial partners, and we'll have the occasion of alluding to this in a coming roundtable. But to us, opening ourselves and opening our research to industrial partner is something important. And for instance, here you have some of the names of the industrial partners that with which we are collaborating right now. Let me give you a quick outlook of our Wiskott-Aldrich trial. Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome is an X-linked immune deficiency, a severe immune deficiency. Patients will usually die before the age of 20. It's an ultra-orphan disease, 40 patients in France. Whenever available, allogenic bone marrow transplant will be the solution, but in many of these patients, we know that there is no allogenic bone marrow transplant possible. So we have developed at Genethon an ex vivo gene therapy strategy. So it's a product that was developed, tested preclinically, produced at Genethon, and the principle is really to take bone marrow stem cells from patients, transduce the cells in vitro, ex vivo in the lab, with the vector allowing to convey the appropriate gene, the WAS gene, re-inject, regraft the modified cells in the patient, and have the corrected cells replace the mutated cells. This trial is currently ongoing both in London at Great Ormond Hospital with Adrian Thrasher. It's ongoing at Hôpital Necker. It's ongoing at Children's Hospital in Boston. We are the sponsor of this trial in Europe. Clearly, I mean, this is a program that really originated from Genethon and a product that is produced at Genethon. We went upfront international for that trial for several reasons. Going international allows us to speed up the recruitment for this very rare disease. Second point, if the trial is successful, going international will allow to speed up the registration process, because our objective is really, if this is successful, to be able to register the drug. This gives you a look at the different timelines here. So we have 15 patients to be treated by 2014, leading us to potential registration if the treatment is successful in 2015. However, in certain countries, we could benefit depending on the first results that we'll get on the first patients with a temporary use authorization that could make the drug available earlier to patients. So let me conclude now. What I hope I have shown you is that in several cases, I mentioned the case of AFM, there are some other organizations out there that have the same trend. In an environment where the funding from classical funding sources, that is pharmaceutical companies, VCs, government funding, where these fundings become rare and rarer, patient groups can appear as a new player in the field. The type of research that is now funded by patient group is not only upstream academic research, but as I showed you today, it can go very far into development and include the production steps. And we at AFM have chosen to create our own R&D centers, fully dedicated and sometimes fully funded to rare disease, and in particular to biotherapies. Now, this has very important consequences for us in terms of culture. I mentioned only one point here. So we have to see our competencies evolve from what are the typical patient groups, I would say competencies and skills, which would be related to fundraising, to scientific evaluation of the programs we fund, to public relation, to networking, to patient registries. But we have to evolve from there to really integrate truly pharmaceutical competencies. And clearly in an organization such as Genethon now, there is a large part of the people there who come with a very strong pharmaceutical background. Now, it has implications also in terms of business model. For organizations such as AFM, there's a new business model out there. We fund the research, we invest massively in research, so us and it's also the case, for instance, for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in the US, we claim rights on intellectual property, share of profits, if any of these drugs go to the market. There's open questions, and this business model, I think, is still to be refined and to be invented. What are the partnerships between patient groups and pharmaceutical industry? Because clearly we know that pharmaceutical companies have an expertise in late development and commercial phases. Are we going to have to take in charge late development and commercial phases? Are we going to be able to partner with pharmaceutical companies? What are the partnerships between patient groups and end payers? In our case, we do receive some government funding. Is there going to be a trade-off between government funding and control of the prices? This is still an open question, and which leads us to the pricing strategies. If any of these drugs get to the market, what pricing strategies are we going to adopt for our drugs? This being said, I thank you for your attention.